Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. Ramadan Mubarak. Thank you for joining me for another episode of 30 Keys to Unlock the Meaning of the Quran. Today we're dealing with key number 26, and that is to understand how the acceptable ways of reading the Quran can impact the meaning, even though slightly. None of these has an effect on the meaning to change anything that Muslims believe or have any significant impact on the practices of Muslims. It so happens that the practices and the beliefs of Muslims evolved side by side with the recitation of the Quran. And so over time, though the Quran was read in a variety of ways, those various readings were all interpreted by the same Muslims to have roughly the same meaning. So let's look at some examples. The Arabic behind most of what is available in terms of English translations is the Cairo Edition, prepared in 1924-25. This is referred to by academics as the Cairo Edition of the Quran. For Muslims, this is the Quran. That is only to put the matter in a simple way. In fact, this edition of the Quran is based on a long tradition of the ways in which the words of the Quran were pronounced, and that pronunciation of the Quran goes all the way back to a person from the 2nd century whose name is Asim, and he is said to have gotten it from his teachers, some of whom are traced back to the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and then ultimately to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon himself. And then for Muslims, that goes all the way back to Angel Gabriel, who revealed it to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and to God himself, who gave it to the Angel Gabriel to give that to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. What we have as the Cairo edition of the Quran, this is prepared according to the reading of Asim through the narration of one of his students, who is referred to as Hafs. But of course, readers of the English translation may not be so much concerned about that. But then if we want to go deeper into the meanings of the Quran, then we want to know, is that the only edition, and how do the other editions impact the meaning? I happen to have here another translation of the Quran, but a translation that's based on another text, another edition of the Quran, you might say. This is entitled Noble Quran, a new rendering of its meaning in English. It is done by Aisha Bewley and Abdul Haq Bewley, published in the United Kingdom. This translation of the Quran is based on another reading. This is also traced all the way back to a 2nd century reader whose name is Nafi, and he was from Medina, and whereas Asim, as you mentioned previously, he was from Kufa. And so we have here a reading that was traced back all the way to Medina from Nafi. It's transmitted to us through one of his later, student called Warsh. So now, if we look into this read this translation of the Quran, we will see some subtle differences. So, for example, most of readers of the Quran will be familiar with the opening chapter called Al-Fatiha. That's the first chapter of the Quran. It reads as normal, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. Now, Malik here is the first, the A is made short, Malik, as opposed to Maliki Yawmiddin, which most readers are familiar with. And so if we say Maliki Yawmiddin with the longer A vowel, then the meaning is owner or master of the Day of Judgment. If we say Malik, which is short, then the meaning is king of the Day of Judgment. And so it is rendered here, the king of the Day of Judgment, in this one by Abdul Haq and Aisha Bewley. So what accounts for this variation in the meaning? It is known among Muslims that these were readings sanctioned by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that he sanctioned a variety of ways of reciting the Quran. Some of those ways survived in what we have as the 10 authenticated readings, the al-Qira'at or Sab', the 7 Qira'at, 7 versions. Now, if we just flip a page here, we go into the 2nd chapter of the Quran, and there is a verse that says, وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْذِبُونَ. That's what most readers are familiar with. In the reading of Warsh on the authority of Nafi, it is bima yukadhibun. because of what they denied. The same basic skeleton text is there, but the way of voweling it is slightly different. So yakdhibun means they lie. Yukadhibun means they give a lie to. The disbelievers who are to be punished are being described in the one reading as those who lie, and in another reading, those who give a lie to, meaning that those who deny the revelation of the Quran. So the Quran is coming down to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The non-believers are detracting from this and denying that this comes from God. They're giving a lie to that. They're calling it a lie, and this is how it is translated in this one by Shabir Ally. Now that may give you the impression that okay, if we turn page by page, every page you're going to find such a significant difference. But the fact is not like that. No, if we call these differences significant, it's not on every page. It's very remote, but it just so happens that in the first couple of pages here, I was able to show you two examples. One might say that these meanings are harmonizable. They do not affect what Muslims believe, because the meaning that says Maliki Yawmiddin, this is not denied by any Muslim, because all Muslims agree, even those who are reading Maliki Yawmiddin, which means owner of the Day of Judgment or master of the Day of Judgment, they're not denying that God is also king of the Day of Judgment. In fact, there are other verses of the Quran which clearly denote that God is the absolute ruler, the monarch, the king of the Day of Judgment. There's no doubt about that. And the fact that he's called Malik, which means king, this is established even in the reading that is most popular, the one of from Hafs and Asim, that the word Malik is found in many places in the Quran as a descriptor for God, as one of his attributes, especially in the last chapter, which is known by heart by many of our viewers, where it says Malikin Nas, Qul a'udhu birabbin nas, Malikin Nas. They say, I seek refuge in the Lord of humankind, God, the King of humankind, Malikin Nas, Ilahin Nas, and so on, God of humankind. In a very introductory way, gives you an impression that yes, there are slightly different ways of reading the Quran that impact the meaning in slight ways, but not in any way that significantly changes what Muslims believe or practice. Even when it comes to the phrases that could have some theological impact, it so happens that the one reading of the Quran supports all of these beliefs, the other reading of the Quran supports all of these beliefs, and the totality of the beliefs are the same between the two readings. Those are just two so far of the 10, right? So how can we get a better idea of the 10 altogether? Well, here is a translation of the Quran that gives you footnotes indicating how the meaning is affected in the variety among the 10. This is the Bridges translation of the Quran, translated by Fadel Soliman and published by Bridges Foundation in the United Kingdom. This could easily be looked up online. And I have here a copy which was personally given to me as a gift by my dear friend, the translator. So if I want to look at an interesting example here so that you get a sense of something that is one of the verses that has perhaps the most impact on the practice of Muslims as far as I can tell. So verse number 6 of Surah 5, called Surah Al-Ma'idah, or the table spread. Verse number 6 says, O you who have attained faith, when you rise for prayer, wash your faces and your hands up to the elbows, and wipe your heads, and in parentheses, wash, and wash your feet to the ankles. Why does he put it in parentheses here for wash your feet? Why does he put the word wash here? So the sequence of the words in English will give the impression that the feet should be wiped, because look how it reads if we didn't mention the word wash here. O you who have attained faith, when you rise for prayer, wash your faces and your hands up to the elbows, and wipe your heads and your feet. So it will seem to say wipe your heads and wipe your feet. So that's why he put the word wash here, to indicate that it is wash, not wipe. But where does he get the word wash from? There is a grammatical explanation for this. So the word for your feet in this reading is arjulakum. So you hear the a vowel in the penultimate syllable, arjula. as opposed to arjulikum, la. So la is the A vowel, li is the I vowel. We'll come back to this I vowel later on. But for the A vowel, so when it is read with the A vowel, this indicates that it has the same case ending, and so the same grammatical position as the word for hands. So since you were to wash your hands, as you were to wash your faces, so your hands and your faces, they were governed as the object of the word wash. And because the ankles here, arjulakum, has the same grammatical case ending as the other terms which are governed by the verb or the imperative wash, so meaning the hands and the face. So it has the same ruling. Then the feet should be washed. Now, this sounds very technical. Remember I said to you that in order to go deeply into the Quran, you need to know a little bit of Arabic. Well, here, just a little bit of Arabic will get you by with this. I mean, some introductory lessons in Arabic will help you to distinguish between, subject case and object case and so on. So this is what we're dealing with here: subject case, object case, and genitive case. So indirect object case, we might say. Now, another reading has it that you should wipe your feet. And how do they get to that? If the word is pronounced arjulikum. Remember, I said I'll come back to the I vowel. So that's the I vowel. It's a very slight change in pronunciation from the A vowel, arjulakum, to the I vowel, arjulikum. Now, if it has the I vowel, it is taking the object in as an indirect object. And that was the case with the heads, which should be wiped. So when it says wipe your heads, and then right after that, your feet, and if your feet is pronounced with the case ending that indicates this is an indirect object, then it has the same case ending as the head, which should be wiped, and therefore the feet should be wiped as well. So therefore, two different readings give you two slightly different meanings of the verse. And this is noted here by my good friend Fadel Soliman. So down at the bottom, he has a footnote that says, all except for Nafi. Remember, we mentioned the name Nafi previously. Nafi is the reciter from Medina. Ibn Kathir, Hafs, Al-Kisai, and Yaqub. So Hafs, remember we mentioned Hafs, who is relating from Asim. All of these persons who were just named read it as wash your faces and your hands up to the elbows and wipe your heads, and your feet to the ankles. The other readers read it in such a way that it'll be naturally flowing, that you wipe your heads and wipe your feet. But the reading that is popular has the grammatical construction that imply that you should wash your feet. But then, does this create a great difference among Muslims with some washing and some wiping? Well, it can, but Muslims have tended to interpret this verse in light of what is known to be generally the practices among Muslims, and Sunni Muslims in particular generally wash their feet. But if they were, let's say, preparing to go to work in the office, and they took their shower in the morning, so they're completely clean from head to toe, and now they put on their socks and they're getting ready to go to work. So when they are ready, let's say for the mid-afternoon, the early afternoon prayer, they don't have to take off their socks and wash their feet. In this case, they can pass moistened fingers over the socks to symbolically, usually it's done with the left hand, so moistened fingers over the socks just to symbolically represent that we are wiping the feet. In that case, we are following one of the readings of the Quranic text. The same verse read in one way can mean wash your feet, and read in another way could mean wipe your feet. And we are doing both. Sometimes you are washing the feet, and sometimes, with stipulations, we are wiping the feet. In this way, we see that the various readings of the Quran are not in conflict with each other, but rather they supplement and complement the meanings, and they expand the meaning. So if one is familiar with the Amplified Bible, one knows that there one would be reading a verse, and then you come to a juncture where within parentheses there are alternative meanings which are given. In a way, the Quran is like the 7 readings, or rather the 10 readings, make the Quran a sort of an amplified book or amplifiable book. And the 10 readings just simply amplify the meaning with different shades of meaning in each way of reading. There are 10 different ways of reading the Quran that are acceptable among Muslims. These 10 different readings have some effect on the meaning, but not such a great effect as to change anything that Muslims believe or to have a significant impact on the practices of Muslims. But it is important as a key to unlocking the meaning of the Quran that we become familiar with the fact that these readings exist, even though we don't know all of the readings and the details of them, and the fact that these affect the meaning in some insignificant way at least. And this will help us as we comb through the commentaries on the Quran to understand the discourse that is being conducted there when references are made to the various readings, and it will help us in our own study of these resources that guide us to the various readings and what impact they have on the meanings. It will help us as lay people to unlock the meaning of the Quran. Join me again tomorrow when I will go even to a deeper level to look at the ways in which the Quran was recited with even greater flexibility within the lifetime of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the earliest Muslims, the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him. That which is referred to as the sab'ati ahruf, the 7 modes of reciting the Quran. And we'll see what impact that could have on meaning. As we are now in the last days and nights of Ramadan, I ask you, my brothers and sisters and friends, to pray for me, pray for the Muslim Media Hub, pray for the success of the entire Ummah, pray for the world. Peace be with you and the mercy of Allah, and Ramadan Mubarak. This Ramadan, we're making history together. Behind me is the building you helped us purchase for the sake of Allah for the establishment of the Muslim Media Hub. We've started filming our television program here called Let the Quran Speak, and we're training the youth to produce other such shows and videos for social media so that we can present the message of Islam to the wider world. This Ramadan, you can help us to raise $100,000 for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Please go to our website, muslimmediahub.com. May Allah bless you and all of your loved ones this Ramadan and forever. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ally, saying Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you, and Ramadan Mubarak.